you've got a lot to say, I'm sure, about what's been happening most recently in New York City and maybe in a broader context. Let's just talk a little bit about the New York City mayoral race. First thoughts.
Well, a lot of people were pretty surprised, but because I follow the left, I wasn't that shocked. This was a little bit like AOC winning, back a few years ago in 2017, I think it was. And Democratic Socialists of America, which is a communist group, that people call it a liberal group, it's a communist group, has 80,000 members. And they had about 20,000 of them focused on that race. I'm talking all the local people, plus all the phone bankers and that they had from Seattle and Tucson and Minneapolis and whatever. So they made it a nationwide effort to win that primary. And now they're doing the same. They want to do the same in the final. So this is a Mamdani, the victor of the Democratic primary, is both a card-carrying Marxist from Democratic Socialists of America, but he's also a Shia Islamist, specifically from the Twelver sect, which is the sect that controls Iran. It's the official branch of Islam that is the state religion in Iran. And the Twelvers believe that their job is to bring that 12th Imam back to earth to usher in the Day of Judgment. That's their religious belief, by instigating maximum chaos on earth. So you got a revolutionary communist who's also a Sharia Twelver who wants to bring chaos to the planet. And he's now we could be in control of the most important financial city in the world, with a very, very large Jewish population. What could possibly go wrong?
It is like a beachhead. Remember, after 9/11, we were supposed to never forget 9/11. And the Muslims wanted to build a mosque right at ground zero, a massive mosque. They call them community centers, Islamic centers, but they are mosques, and they're also essentially taking a stand that we're planting our flag here. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And we're so bold that we would even deign to put a mosque, or attempt and fight to put a mosque at ground zero of 9/11. Just audacious. It was defeated. I was surprised at it being defeated. But here we have just the next salvo, or, it's an enclave. It's building a political base. It's shattering barriers in people's mind. It's one thing in Dearborn. It's one thing in Paterson, New Jersey, which are horrific, and the Houston issue. But to be the mayor of New York is, I would say, the equivalent to being the mayor of London. Sadiq Khan.
Even more important, look, it's the center of American capitalism. It's the Jewish center, the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. If you're talking in terms of dominance and planting the flag, getting the mayoralty of New York is a huge feather in the cap of the jihadists and terrorists and Islamists. Now, we know that Iran was involved in 9/11. That's been proven in court. Iran played a big role in 9/11. Yet 23 years later, somebody from the same sect that helped to instigate 9/11 and kill 3,000 New Yorkers is now the mayor of the city.
We're going
could be the mayor of the city.
God forbid.
And here's the point. How could that have happened if we'd had a free and independent and courageous media in the country? How many New Yorkers do you think even know the guy is a Shia Muslim, let alone a Twelver, or what Twelver means, or how communist the Democratic Socialists of America is? They play it like it's liberal and it's socialist and it's a little bit democratic and whatever. no, it's hardcore communists. These people have alliances with Cuba. They have Cuban diplomats at their meetings. They send delegations to foreign communist gatherings. They're a communist group. So he's in a revolutionary communist group, backed by about 20,000 of their supporters around the country. Plus, he's a 12er Sharia, a 12er Shia Muslim from a very radical family, and backed by both Sunni and Shia Muslims, and has backed his campaign.
I want to ask you about an issue that has divided some New Yorkers in recent weeks. You were recently asked about the term globalize the intifada, if it makes you uncomfortable. In that moment, you did not condemn the phrase. Now, just so folks understand, it's a phrase that many people hear as a call to violence against Jews. There's been a lot of attention on this issue. So I want to give you an opportunity to respond here and now. Do you condemn that phrase, globalize the intifada?
That's not language that I use. The language that I use and the language that I will continue to use to lead this city is that which speaks clearly to my intent, which is an intent grounded in a belief in universal human rights. And ultimately, that's what is the foundation of so much of my politics, the belief that freedom and justice and safety are things that, to have meaning, have to be applied to all people, and that includes Israelis and Palestinians alike.
But do you actually condemn it? I think that's the question and the outstanding issue that a number of people, both of the Jewish faith and beyond, have. Do you condemn that phase, globalize the intifada, which a lot of people hear as a call to violence against Jews?
I've heard from many Jewish New Yorkers who have shared their concerns with me, especially in light of the horrific attacks that we saw in Washington, D.C. and in Boulder, Colorado, about this moment of anti-Semitism in our country and in our city. And I've heard those fears and I've had those conversations, and ultimately they are part and parcel of why in my campaign I've put forward a commitment to increase funding for anti-hate crime programming by 800%. I don't believe that the role of the mayor is to police speech in the manner especially of that of Donald Trump, who has put one New Yorker in jail who's just returned to his family, Mahmoud Khalil, for that very supposed crime of speech. Ultimately, what I think I need to show is the ability to not only talk about something, but to tackle it and to make clear that there's no room for anti-Semitism in this city. And we have to root out that bigotry. And ultimately, we do that through the actions. And that is the mayor I will be, one that protects Jewish New Yorkers and lives up to that commitment through the work that I do.
But quickly, for the people who care about the language and who feel really concerned by that phrase, why not just condemn it?
My concern is to start to walk down the line of language and making clear what language I believe is permissible or impermissible takes me into a place similar to that of the president, who is looking to do those very kinds of things, putting people in jail for writing an op-ed, putting them in jail for protesting. Ultimately, it's not language that I use. It's language I understand there are concerns about. And what I will do is showcase my vision for the city through my words and my actions.
Yeah, this is a real insult to America. This is going to be a lot of grief for President Trump. I hope he understands that. Because he's going to fight ICE. He's going to defund the police. He's going to try and close down the New York Police Intelligence Department. Terrorists and anarchists and radicals are going to flock to New York. Businesses are going to move out. The tax base is going to collapse. Crime's going to go through the roof. And the jewel of the East Coast will be Detroit on the East Coast. That's what's going to happen if this guy's has his way.
And, it seems to me that you mentioned that people don't understand. You mentioned the media. If we did have a responsible media, and of course, the alternate media is actually taking over for the establishment media, but I think most New Yorkers watch PBS and NPR and CBS, NBC, ABC. I'm sure they're pretty much, because of their liberalism, very, very ignorant. And even if they understood it to a certain degree, because they obviously know, I'm assuming they know he's a Muslim and that he's a recent naturalized citizen of the United States, and that he's a Marxist. I mean, do they just not understand what that means, or do they think we don't care because we want chaos, we want to tear it down?
You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them.
Well, New York is a very liberal city because it's very union heavy. And you've got the New York Times there, which has always been penetrated by the hard left, going back 100 years now. So they're the anchors. And like if you're a journalist in a major US network or a paper like the New York Times, you're not going to file a story about this guy's radical Marxist background and tell the truth, because you won't have a job very long if you do. So all you're going to do is do puff pieces. Oh, he's a democratic socialist because he really stands for democracy. He's
and the people.
Beating back, the people. He's beating back Islamophobia. So you've got a very, very left-wing media there. Like, I think if he stood for the mayoralty of Boise, Idaho, he might have struggled a lot more. Or, a more conservative state. He wouldn't have got elected in Florida because the media would be a bit freer in Florida. New York was a perfect place because it's very, very left. The media's on his side, and he's got a big support base, and it's just a wonderful target for them. But it's a beach, exactly as you say. It's a beachhead in the Islamization and the Marxist revolution on two fronts in the United States.
Isn't it also caused by a naivete with regard to our immigration policy? This man was rapping about supporting the Holy Land Foundation convicted for, I'm not sure the exact charge, but it's for funding Hamas, a designated terror group, or the Muslim Brotherhood. And it seems to me that our immigration and naturalization services, if they took things slower, people want to speed it up. But if they took things slower and truly delved into the background, he was a Marxist, which is illegal to come into the United States of America as an immigrant. It's part of our immigration policy, our law, and that is to belong to a Marxist organization. I think if you do it before you're 18, it's okay, youthful indiscretions, right? But he's an Islamist supporting Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood, and he's a Marxist as he's being naturalized as a citizen of the United States.
Yeah, well, that obviously happened under a Democratic, or didn't happen under President Trump. I'm sure, I don't know. But look, there's a number of problems with the immigration system. And as you're quite correct, when I came to this country, I had to declare I'd never belonged to any, the word was communist or fascist organization that sought to overthrow or undermine the U.S. Constitution. The problem is when you've got a group like Democratic Socialists of America, they would deny that they're communist. Like a friend of mine was talking to an FBI agent not long ago and said, you guys should be investigating Democratic Socialists of America. He said, oh, we can't do that. They're democratic, but they are a Marxist organization that work with the Communist Party USA, that attends communist conferences, that's allied to communist Cuba, has a communist philosophy. So that we need to broaden slightly the wording of the immigration laws. Any communist or Marxist or revolutionary group, or any group, religious or otherwise, that seek to overthrow the Constitution. Because if you believe in Sharia law, which I'm presuming this guy does, you're automatically seeking to overthrow or undermine the U.S. Constitution. So there's a number of factors. If applied correctly, I think he should have been denied under existing law, but with a little bit of tightening up and a better wording of the immigration code, there's a whole number of ways he could be excluded from the country, and maybe still could be. I know Andy Ogles has raised this point to the congressman from Tennessee. how did this guy get in? Did he lie in his application form? So and that sent the Islamic left into an absolute tizzy, over that one, because most of them would have to go too if that standard was applied.
And that's what I was sort of getting to, because I don't think it depends upon President Trump being in office. I don't think he would have been excluded at the time. I think that we need to be more intentional and deliberate in our exclusions, because once someone becomes naturalized legally, you can't denaturalize someone other than if they broke the law during their naturalization process and lied on their forms. And I think what I would probably sum it up as is this: Sharia, as you properly state, is antithetical to Western civilization, in particular our Constitution. And to me, I wouldn't just broaden it in a very, narrow way or tiny way. I would actually broaden it to include supporting Sharia, jihad, and, Islamism or Islamist ideology, or Islamofascism, or Islamo-supremacism, because all of those things, because basic Quranic Hadith Islam is at odds or an adversary or at war with democracy and our Constitution.
Look, 100%. Look, they exclude Nazis and communists because the Nazis said, we want to rule the world and we are going to make everybody a Nazi if we don't kill them. They said that. Well, the communists say, we want an international revolution. We're going to overthrow the capitalist system. They say it. Well, Islam says the whole world belongs to Allah and we're going to take it back. What is the difference there? What's the substantive difference? All three of them are openly advocating for the destruction of our system. The only reason Islam gets a pass is because they hide under the religious aspect. But Islam has a very, very big political component. It's a debate whether it's a religion with a political component or a political system with a bit of religious veneer. It is
true.
I don't care what you believe. I don't care if you believe in Frank Zappa's flying spaghetti monster. I care about, spiritual. I care about your politics. And if you believe in Islam as it's written, you believe the whole world belongs to Allah, and your job as a Muslim is to take it back for Allah, irrespective of who occupies that territory now. So that's an aggressive movement, political movement right there that stands in direct opposition to the U.S. Constitution. So, if we're serious about defending the country, we've got to cover that base.
Yeah, and I don't think they can even affirm that we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all I'm pulling a Biden
right.
That all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because dhimmitude under Sharia, which is the law of Islam, you cannot have Sharia without dhimmitude and the subjugated classes. So therefore, you cannot affirm that all men are created equal and endowed with those unalienable rights. So they are at odds with the Constitution and the Declaration immediately.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, because Islam divides you, and people it's a class society. If you're not a Muslim, you're a third or fourth class citizen. You are you have special taxes. You are treated in a different way. It's an apartheid system.
I'd say the same thing, apartheid. Exactly.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to just throw out at you, and other people are talking about that, and this is not new. There, so many members of Congress, the radicalists, the most radical ones, are naturalized citizens coming from South Asia, India. We have this fellow, he's from Uganda, but it seems to me that some people that we could take seriously the question of whether or not a naturalized foreigner to become a naturalized citizen should even be running for office. There is no right to become an American citizen, and there's no right to become or run really for office. There's no requirement there. Some people are excluded for different reasons. So what are your thoughts about that, this radicalization of our political system because of this onslaught of naturalized citizens who are running for high office?
Well, that's right. And that is complicated further by the issue of birthright citizenship. So a Chinese Communist Party member's wife could come to this country 8.5 months pregnant and have her little communist baby here, who becomes an American citizen, then comes back and runs for office in New York or somewhere else 30 years later. Yeah, of course, that's unbelievable. And I hope President Trump can get this birthright citizenship thing put to bed once and for all. So yeah, look, I don't object to any of that. American citizenship should be a privilege, and standing for office. There's a legitimate argument to say that a foreign-born person should not be allowed to stand for office.
Well, you can't do it as president, so it's just a matter of degree then, isn't it? Let me ask you about tactics. His parents are Marxists, so I assume he is legitimately or sincerely a Marxist. But in reality, Marxism and Islamism or political Islam are really oil and water because they don't believe in anything other than an Islamic caliphate, an Islamic ruler under Sharia law. But just like with Iran, when the Marxists aligned with the Islamists and they brought about the revolution, and then, of course, the Marxists were imprisoned or killed. I'm wondering, is there any part of this in his ideology or in his heart, which we can't really know, where he is a Marxist, but in reality he wants to burn it all down and build it back up into a Muslim enclave and a Muslim government and ideologies?
Look. This is how I see things. Carlos Jackal said that only an alliance of Marxism and Leninism and Islamism could bring down the United States. So the two systems have been working together for a long time. They have since the early days of the Soviet Revolution. When the Soviets took over Russia, they shut down the Christian churches and persecuted, murdered priests, etc. But they weren't strong enough to do that to the madrasas and the mosques in Central Asia. They would have got a lot of pushback. They didn't have control over those areas. So rather than inflame the population, they infiltrated the mosques and madrasas and basically set up what you would call Soviet Islam. And they used that as a bridge after World War II to set up the Palestine Liberation Organization, to be involved in Hamas and many of the Muslim terrorist organizations. The communists also got inside the Nation of Islam very, very early on in the United States. 2 editors of Muhammad Speaks in a row were Communist Party members at one point. So this is the thing. It's always a question. The KGB has always been involved in the Islamic movement for a long time, and the Chinese and the Cubans and the Venezuelans and others. Who's the boss? I'm sure there were some Islamic fighters who believe they're going to use the communists, then they're going to kill them like everybody else. But there's a lot of communists too who think, well, we're going to use Islam just like we use the Christian church, just like we use Black Lives Matter, just like we use anything else. And this is my view. If it comes to push versus shove, and the two sides square off, where they've beaten us, they've destroyed us, you got Islam rules the world, communism rules the world, they start to fight it out. How many nukes do the Muslims have compared to how many nukes the communists have?
Well, thank God for President Trump. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because they just have the the Pakistanis at this point. But as J.D. Vance said, that the first Muslim or Muslim Brotherhood type nation to get nukes is Great Britain.
Well, yeah, it's the cynical way. Well, France maybe too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's true. So
that's a good point. That's a very good point. But I think there's a big debate who controls who at different levels. Is like Iran, for instance. The Tudeh Party of Iran, the Iranian Communist Party, worked with the mullahs, put the mullahs in power, and then the mullahs slaughtered the Tudeh Party. But they still remained loyal to the Soviet Union, and many of the mullahs were trained at Patrice Lumumba's school. Because I think it suited the Soviet Union not just have another communist state, but to have an Islamist state that they secretly controlled. It was much better for their work against Israel and to stir up terrorism around the world, to not have it openly communist. So it varies around the world, but they two work hand in glove. I tend to think the communists dominate, but other friends of mine think it's the other way around.
I'm so glad you brought up the Soviet Union and Islam, because I had not been aware of that. I know, of course, that in 1933, Haj Amin al-Husseini contacted Hitler right as he was elected as chancellor, and Hitler didn't pay any attention to him, but they had already been funding the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and they began to fund Haj Amin al-Husseini's Palestinianism, is what I call it, in the future state of Israel. And so they were very, very closely aligned, and Nazism is, of course, just a form of radical socialism.
Socialism.
And so it seems that the greatest threats in the world are always aligned in some way, in some form. And this is where I kind of go to the question of, how do we talk about Islam, his Muslim half of the equation, as much as we talk about the Marxism, because some people will say, oh, he's just a socialist, which is a Marxist, so people, we have to elevate that to what it really is. It's not just Norway. Okay, this is not just a welfare state.
This is Cuba, not Norway. Yes,
right.
Yeah.
But people find it difficult in America, falling on the heels of Europe's capitulation and actually embrace of Islam, and the fear of ever sounding like someone who would criticize another person's religion. And I think that we have to start criticizing religion in this country openly. Like you and I are talking here, I'm talking to as many people as possible, thoughtful, intelligent, educated people, about let's shift that Overton window. We've got to start talking about radical Islam, which is Islam, the Quranic Islam, very, very vocally and without fear and embarrassment, because Islamophobia is the fear of being punished for talking about critiquing Islam.
Yeah, like you can't talk about Black Lives Matter, which is a Marxist group, because then you're a racist. No, right. I don't care what
it's
color
like
they are, except the red part of it. I care the red part of it. So that's the point. We've got to talk about Islam. See, nobody's getting all upset about Hindus walking around America, or little Hindu enclaves, or Buddhist enclaves, or Zoroastrian enclaves. Nobody gets all upset about those, because they don't go blowing people up and taking over places and running other people out. People get upset about Islam because Islam is a very political operation. We should talk about Islam as a political organization with a religious veneer. You can worship who you like, but we don't want your politics here. Thank you. You cooperated with the Nazis. you cooperated with the communists. Both of those, after World War II, when the Nazis were defeated, the Muslim Brotherhood switched allegiance to the Soviet Union. So you cooperated with the communists, you cooperated with the Nazis, you have burnt cities, you have tortured, you committed multiple acts of terrorism, you force your will on other people, you call for an apartheid state, there's a whole bunch of other things you do. We don't want your politics in America.
And I think that our immigration has to be limited from third world countries.
Yeah, well, look, for a long time it was, but it was Ted Kennedy, the Marxist, who got that all changed in 1965.
Yeah.
I'm sure the behest of the Soviet Union, certainly at the behest of the socialist movement, because he was very close friends, founder of Democratic Socialists of America, Michael Harrington, by the way back then. So, yeah, the whole purpose was to dilute the conservative voting base, dilute the culture of America with as many third world operatives as you could. This would cause division. This would cause economic impoverishment and ghettoization. It would produce a whole bunch more revolutionary cadre, and it would produce a whole bunch more left-wing voters. That's why it was done. And the same tactic has been used in virtually every European country. In Australia, like the Communist Prime Minister of Australia, who I just wrote a book about, Anthony Albanese, they brought in nearly 2 million third world immigrants into Australia in the last 3 years. 30% of Australians now are foreign born. How long can you maintain your culture?
30%.
30%. We talk about Europe, we talk about France and Sweden. 30% Australian voters are foreign born. Now, some of those are New Zealanders, which is not a bad thing. Some of them are British, but a lot of them are Chinese, Lebanese. And it's interesting, in Australia, it's well known. A lot of Lebanese come to Australia in the 50s, about 40% Muslim, about 60% Christian. The Christians did great. The Maronite Catholics did great. They're all lawyers and doctors now. The Muslims ghettoized, and now they're renowned for their crime rates and their gangs and their drug dealing, etc. This is, you can't generalize about a people, but these are two identical ethnic people. Some are Christian, some are Muslim. Your religious outlook affect your citizenship and behavior.
It defines your culture.
It defines your culture and your political outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Two people. One has adopted Islam, one has adopted Christianity. You know which people you better have as your neighbors.
That's right.
You know which ones are going to cause less trouble and be better citizens. That's just the reality of life, and we all know that, but it's not politic to say it. Well, a lot more people have got to say it, because Islam is only ever going to have a genuine reformation, which is long overdue for, like Christianity had, if the world tells Islam we're not happy with what you're doing.
Right. If we're afraid to speak out against the evil of Islam, then, and I can't criticize someone's religion. In the Christian church, people are more vocal, like Protestants speaking about Catholics or Seventh-day Adventists or Mormons, and I'm not equating all of them, let me just say that. You know what I'm saying.
Talk about the different. It's okay to discuss the different.
And to say that Mormonism is not Christianity or Seventh-day Adventism is a heresy, or we disagree with Catholicism and its history, and Catholics can do the same. That is very, very well known, and I mean well understood that this kind of very, very heated discussion can be had, and there's no fear or little fear there. However, what I do notice today is that there are people that are portraying themselves as Christians who I do not think know their scriptures, and they are going after Judaism, Jews, Zionists, and Israel as if they were, like the Antichrist, Whereas Islam is sitting there beheading 70 people and children in one day in Nigeria, burning a building down around 210 people just a couple of weeks ago, slaughtering people, and the entire Middle East is being ethnically cleansed or religiously cleansed of all Christianity, and but not as much as being said by these anti-Zionist, anti-Israel Christians.
Very glad you brought this up, because these people are not Christians by and large. They use the meme "Christ is King." Christ is King. That's not that's not a statement about faith in Christ. That's saying you Jews are bad people. You
Right.
killed Christ. Look, there has been a major campaign by the Russians and the Iranians over the last 30 years to build up anti-Semitism in the right. That's been a deliberate campaign. And and it's infected
How do
people.
you know that? Let me be.
Because I read their literature. I read Alexander Dugin. I read the Nazi websites. You can all trace them back to Russia. These Christ the King types, these anti-Israel types, are all loyal to Iran, and most of them are loyal to Russia. That can be easily tracked down. There's a real clear path there, and that has been pushed through QAnon. That's been pushed through some of the libertarian movement. It's been pushed through the Christian identity movements, the Nazi movements, the alt-right. The Russians and the Iranians have been working to split America from Israel now for 30 years, mainly by spreading anti-Semitism. That's sort of what you're now seeing coming from Tucker Carlson, what you're seeing coming from Candace Owens. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's actually a phrase for this. I've been J-pilled. It means I've finally woken up. It's all the Jews. It's all the Jews. Now I understand. So you got all these people on our side of the fence who many of them were sensible people. Now don't care about Russia. They don't care about China. They don't care about Iran. But they're so upset about Israel. They're totally Israel is the center of all evil on the planet.
That is the definition of anti-Semitism. When you demonize one state, while genocide is going on in Africa by Islamics, in all across the Middle East, and against Christians, which we should care about. If we are Christians and if we love the Lord, we should care about those lives. But instead, all eyes are focused on Israel fighting a war, but the Islamists calling it a genocide. So, and let me make one point about the Crisis King thing, because I was going to do a video on this, and I just didn't get around to it. But I wanted to say this. If I say Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, there's nothing wrong with me saying that. If I say he is the King of the universe, he's the great I am, he's the Alpha and the Omega, I can say so many things. But when it becomes a Jewish person makes a political statement, you ask them, well, do you think we should be bombing Iran? And they say yes, and then you say, Christ is King. I know I'm making a caricature of it, but that's essentially what it is. Smash you and the debate. You look like you hate our God, and you just humiliated them and put them in their place as Christ killers.
100%. Most of the people who use this Christ is King meme, and as you said, if you make all the original statements as a sincere Christian, that's fine. These people have never been in a church in their lives most of the time.
Or read the Bible.
Or read the Bible. This is only co-opting Christianity to attack Judaism and Israel. The Christ the King meme, that's what it is. And we know, you can say, look, when the Cubans were being executed by Castro, they'd say, Viva Christos Rey, long live Christ the King. In that context, that was a very sincere statement. I'm not, you know, some people will say
and the founders, not the founders, the soldiers would say, or the American, I don't know, the farmers that were fighting, they would say no king but King Jesus. That was not directed
at Jews.
Well, it wasn't directed at Jews, but it doesn't have the same flavor. I won't take time to explain why that is. But I do want to say, do not clip this video and think to say that I'm against someone making the statement. By the way, that does not appear in the Bible as a phrase. It is a truth from the scriptures, because he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he is called in the New Testament the King of Israel more than once. But my point is, Christ is King, Christ is King, Christ is King is a slogan that is cobbled together, and it is used for a belligerent purpose. And you know what? I've never heard of evangelizing someone by basically attempting to be as offensive to them as possible instead of persuading them in love. And that is what we're called to do.
100%. Well, you can imagine one of these people saying, once we've just used this statement, they say, Elizabeth and Trevor, they're anti-Christian because they don't like people saying Christ is King. No, we don't like people co-opting
weaponizing it too.
Co-opting a semi-Christian phrase and using it to attack Jews, because that's all it is. That is, well, when you see this on the internet, somebody makes Christ is King. That is a big.
That's a problem.
It's an offensive statement, but a lot of people don't understand this.
But let me ask you this. You're saying that the Soviets or the Russians, Soviets, the communists, Chinese, Iran, actually you mentioned, have been attempting to inflame these various shades of political, ideological thought groups into an anti-Semitic, Jew-hating activism, and basically getting out there and speaking very clearly on X. There's more anti-Semitism, and I'm not calling for necessarily any kind of censorship or by X about this, but I have never ever seen in my entire life, other than in Nazi and Islamic literature, the kind of stuff that I see that makes me, like, it's horrifying, the things that are said and what is portrayed. I'm actually getting a little bit off track here, but what I will say is this. It seems to me that America, which has blessed Israel, and I'm going to take this moment to say this, Ted Cruz blew his answer on this, but I'll tell you what, it is not just Genesis 12:3 that is about blessing Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel. It is also that they were given this is a commercial. They were given, it's not a commercial. What I'm saying is this. Israel was given the Abrahamic covenant, which carries down through Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes of Israel. So therefore, they have the same blessing as was given to Abraham. So it is indeed accurate to say Genesis 12:3. But 3 chapters in Numbers is dedicated to Balak and Balaam. And he says Balaam was asked to curse Israel for the king, Balak. And he says he's tried, but God prevents him because God will not allow those to curse, him to curse those that he has blessed. So it is directly said about Israel. And then I will just say one more thing. This is not what this conversation was supposed to be about. But Jesus says that at the end, he will sit on the throne of judgment and he will separate the nations, the Gentiles, between goats and sheep. And on the right hand, he will put the sheep. And what did they do? He says, whatsoever you did to these, the least of my brethren, he was speaking of his family, Israel, you did it unto me. And to the goats that he casts into perdition, he says, every time that you didn't feed them, clothe them, give them drink, visit them. You did it unto me. Depart from me. And so this is carried throughout the scriptures. Sorry, we took that diversion. I know we don't have that much time. Go ahead.
Well, I want to add on a very important point to this. See, what I'm talking about here is a very deep program instigated by the Russians and the Chinese, Russians and the Iranians, to divide America from traditional allyship with Israel, right? Denigrating Israel. Israel controls the world.
Demonic.
AIPAC's a problem. All this garbage. Well, here's an example how this Iranian propaganda works. So Iran just got heavily bombed and their communications got disrupted. All of the websites, the Twitter sites, the X sites in Scotland calling for Scottish independence crashed all at once, all went offline, because they were all instigated by Iran. Iran is an ally of Russia. Why are they promoting Scottish independence from Iran? Because Scotland has one of the most important naval bases in the east coast of Scotland that basically controls the entrance to the North Sea. And any future war with Russia, that's so important. If Scotland goes independent, NATO and the UK lose that base. That's why the Russians and Iranians are promoting Scottish independence.
I thought I saw that post and that information, not about the naval base. Thank you for clarifying that for me. But when that happened, and I thought, what would happen? Well, I don't know what happened in the United States. I know that Iran has entire divisions set up of people just doing disinformation on the internet, posing, and the Chinese too.
And the Russians, all three of them do. You know,
so a lot of that anti-Semitism may be out there to give make a normalization of this kind of speaking, where people say, well, gee, if I'm seeing it everywhere, therefore there must be something to it. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Look, that's absolutely right. All three of these countries have armies of people on the internet feeding stuff into X, into Facebook, through all these established websites, anti-Israel, anti-Ukraine, anti-America, anti-Taiwan, Scottish independence, or whatever you like, whatever will benefit the evil empire. They are pumping it out 24/7, and they pump it out all through all these conspiracy websites. So all these people say, "Oh, this is not Russian. I researched this." Well, yeah, you researched it, but there's all these websites out there designed to lead certain people into certain paths. You would not believe the psychology experts that the Russians and the Chinese have, who know American psychology very, very well and know how to manipulate both sides of any issue. You know, this is a massive operation.
This is a massive, massive operation. And all I could say is that I think that President Trump needs to look at this. He's been so busy, necessarily so, and I've never seen an administration that has had to deal with deliberately and by just by circumstances on the national stage, so many great issues from the very beginning. So I grant he has been so busy, but I think that this infiltration, which is what I think the word that is best used about this, into the United States, whether it be by cyber warfare, I think that could be shut down if we were diligent. If we wanted to take it to the mattresses and fight on this, I think we could win, but we could easily win, at least for a respite, a shutdown of immigration from entire regions in the Middle East and Africa and South. Go ahead.
I think that the America will not survive unless that's done. All illegals have to go home, and we have to change the requirements, the criteria for who we bring in.
Yeah, and testing them.
If we shut down all immigration for 10 years, that wouldn't be a bad thing.
No, a lot of people are calling for that, I think.
Yeah, look, after World War I, there was a massive increase in immigration to America from people all over Europe, and you could understand why. they virtually shut down immigration after that 30 years because they needed to allow people time to integrate, to become Americans, to shed their own culture, adopt a new, well, not necessarily get rid of their old culture, but adopt the new culture. You can't maintain a culture if you're having 2 million third worlders come into your country every single year for 50 years. You're not going to be the same country.
It's a destruction of the United States, and that is the intention, absolutely, because that's just another form of jihad. From the womb of their women, it's the hijra, it's immigration, like Muhammad did. It is through population explosion, birth rate, and it's also kinetic warfare. No.
When's the last time you had a Muslim knock on your door and say, look, would you like to come down to the mosque? We're having a service this Saturday. You don't get proselytized very often by Muslims. Most Islam has been spread by conquest or demographics. Very little was done by proselytization.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists. And we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right? Or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production. And with every battle that we fight as socialists, we need to remember what the stakes are and ground ourselves in them and why those stakes are important and critical to us as individuals.
What I see here is this foothold, the beachhead, the breaking down of social norms. Once you have someone in office or who has transcended what is considered normal in a country, then the floodgates are opened in a sense. And I see this. Paterson, New Jersey, calls itself the fourth holiest city in Islam. It's renamed Main Street Palestine Way. It's cops wear Palestinian flags. It's police officers. Dearborn, Michigan is completely gone. The poor people of Dearborn that are not Muslim, but they have an all-Muslim city council, a Muslim mayor, and it's a jihad city. It's in America. And then we have Houston, and we have, I suppose New York has a huge population. So what are we to do? How are we to address this? Is this, well, I guess that's kind of a big question. Let me throw it to you and see what you can do with it.
Look, the man in charge, one of the main people in charge of the Epic City project, recently said we need 100 more Mamdani. So to your point, yes, it's the floodgate. Once you get a few, they'll keep flooding in. Look, I think the first step President Trump's got to do is get rid of the elite. So that's step number one. Step number two is close off the United States to any significant migration from now on and get rid of birthright citizenship. That will leave you with several million Muslims in the country. Like if you go out to Iowa, you see Bosnian Muslims, but they're very secular Muslims, and they blend in pretty darn well. There's not a big issue in Iowa with Bosnian Muslims. But what you're going to have to do is there's going to have to be intense federal pressure on the existing Muslim population to absolutely rid themselves of any radical element, foreign elements, whatever. It's got to be very well known to the Muslim community. You involved with terrorism, you get involved with any advocacy against the United States, you indoctrinate your kids against the Constitution, you are going to be stripped of your citizenship and you're going to leave the country. That's got to be very, very clear. Now, I know some Muslims who would be very happy with that. They just want to come here and make some money and live a good life or whatever. But it's like the old Italian community. When the mafia ruled the Italian community, the normal Italians wouldn't speak out of fear. Well, right now, when jihadists rule the Islamic communities, because we don't challenge them, a lot of the average Muslims won't speak up out of fear, because they just, most of them are pretty.
But once there is, I like to think about this. An individual Muslim could be my neighbor. I can go to dinner with the family, whatever. Just have a regular relationship. But importing populations, there is no peaceful, democratic, America-loving population of Muslims. In other words, what I'm saying is that once the Ummah is constituted in a foreign nation, that there is a groupthink, which is normal, by the way. This is normal. If you live in an enclave of Christians anywhere in America or anywhere else, you're going to think more Christianized or as a Christian, because you're submersed in your environment with your fellow believers. That's what churches are for. But importing populations and creating the enclaves, there's no, I don't know how many non-radicals live in Dearborn, but I'm going to say it's this big because they're all wearing the black. They're all wearing the full covering, and
they get a dog, like in Palestine. Yeah, well, and the occupied Gaza, what I should say.
Territories, Gaza and the territories.
The territories. Probably a majority, 70 or 80% of the population there supports Hamas to some degree, and doesn't like Jews, is pretty much into it. But you've got to deal with that. But there's always going to be some people that are okay, and there's going to be more okay people the more you deal with the bad guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people are going to break out of the thinking. But look, it was a bad idea bringing large numbers of Muslims to the United States. That when you're drowning, the first thing you do is you turn off. When you're drowning in your bathtub, the first thing you do is turn off the tap. So we got to do that first. And we got to deal with the illegals. We got to deal with birthright citizenship. And then I think the federal government is going to start having to go really harshly investigate Islamic radicalism in this country, like they've investigated communism, like they've investigated the Klan, like they invested the German-American bond and the Italian silver shirts before World War II, and all of those people. You've got to be recognized as a problem population. Gosh, they interred a whole bunch of Japanese during World War II. On